Hello and welcome back to our World War I series. In the previous issue, we covered the Battle of Jutland in 1916. That epic battle between battleships ultimately consolidated Britain's maritime hegemony and completely sealed Germany's overseas prospects. But when the Western Front fell into an aimless trench stalemate and the dust settled on the sea battle, the truly disruptive change of World War I quietly erupted in the Russian Empire on the Eastern Front. This war was a devastating blow to Britain and France, but for Russia, it was a catastrophic disaster at the national level. Again, this long war completely dragged down this vast empire and ultimately triggered the earth-shattering Russian Revolution, which not only overthrew the century-old dynasty of Russia, but also directly rewrote the final direction of World War I. Many people curious why the once vast and powerful Russian Empire collapsed completely in just a few years. The answer is simple. Tsarist Russia simply cannot sustain a modern overall war. Compared to the well-developed industrial systems of Britain and France, the industrial foundation of Tsarist Russia was extremely weak. The logistics system was riddled with loopholes and the military equipment was severely outdated. At the cruelest moment, a large number of Russian soldiers on the front line did not even have rifles and could only charge with bayonets, using their bodies to fight against the German guns. In just 2 years of the war, the Russian military suffered over 3 million casualties. Countless young soldiers have died on the battlefield, and the front lines are retreating one after another. The defeat is already irreversible. The front line is bleeding like a river, and the rear is a purgatory on earth. The prolonged war completely penetrated Russia's domestic economy. Food is extremely scarce, prices are skyrocketing, and ordinary people are completely trapped in dire straits. Urban workers can only receive a few hundred grams of bread per day, which is not enough to satisfy their hunger. Rural farmers, on the other hand, would rather hoard grain than sell it to the government at a low price. The official policy of collecting grain at low prices has completely exhausted the patience of the people, ignites the spread of war and the collapse of people's livelihoods. The rulers who control the country are completely incapable of fulfilling their responsibility. Tsar Nicholas II was a typical incompetent monarch. During the war, he personally took over the position of commander-in-chief of the Russian army, but he had no military talent and knew nothing about commanding operations, gradually destroying the Russian army's advantages and strength, even more deadly. He handed over full power of the country to Queen Alexandra. The Queen is extremely superstitious and deeply controlled by a mysterious sorcerer named Rasputin. Rasputin was originally an ordinary farmer in Siberia, relying on a set of so-called healing secrets to infiltrate the upper echelons, because he successfully alleviated the hemophilia of the only son of the Tsar and won the absolute trust of the Empress. From then on, Rasputin completely controlled the political affairs of the Russian Empire, intervened in national decision-making recklessly, promoted close aides and planted party members, and made the entire Russian high-level officialdom chaotic. The corrupt, chaotic and absurd rule has made the Russian aristocracy and military officers completely intolerable, and domestic conflicts have escalated completely. In December 1916, intolerable Russian nobles joined forces to assassinate Rasputin, but at this time the Tsarist Russia was already terminally ill, and eliminating a demon could not save the fate of the empire on the brink of collapse. The spark of revolution has already spread throughout the country. On March 8, 1917, which is February 23 in the Russian calendar, the February Revolution officially broke out. Civilian women in Petrograd took to the streets to protest. And protest because they couldn't buy bread. This march, originally just for the sake of food and clothing, quickly escalated into a large-scale strike and armed uprising throughout the city. More importantly, the station soldiers completely turned to the people and resolutely refused to shoot at the protesting civilians. In just 1 week, a wave of uprising swept across the entire city. On March 15, 1917, Tsar Nicholas II was forced to abdicate. The Romanov dynasty, which ruled Russia for over 300 years, was completely destroyed. After the February Revolution, a very strange situation emerged in Russia. Two regimes coexisted. One is a temporary government formed by the bourgeoisie, which controls the surface power of the country. The other is the Soviet of workers and soldiers, which controls the hearts and armed forces of the lower classes. But this interim government completely ignores the core demands of the people. At that time, the Russian people only wanted three things the most: peace, bread and land. The provisional government insisted on continuing to participate in the war and prolonging the conflict in order to gain support from the Allied powers. This decision has completely ignited public dissatisfaction, and a new storm is brewing. At this critical juncture, Lenin secretly returned to Russia from Switzerland. He delivered the shocking April outline at the Finnish railway station, shouting the most popular slogan, "All power belongs to the Soviet Union." He clearly advocated for immediate withdrawal from World War I, the return of land to farmers, and the return of power to the people. This set of proposals that hit the pain point instantly ignited the whole country, and the support rate of the Bolshevik party skyrocketed. Within just a few months, it gathered the support of a large number of people and soldiers. In July 1917, in order to consolidate its position, the Russian provisional government forcibly ordered the exhausted Russian army to launch a large-scale attack on the Eastern Front. There is no doubt that this adventurous attack ended in a disastrous defeat, with the Russian army suffering up to 1,000 casualties in a single day. The news of the disastrous defeat was transmitted back to the country, completely angering the public. Large-scale demonstrations erupted again in Petrograd, and the interim government chose to use force to suppress them, creating the bloody to-life bloodshed. After this battle, the possibility of peaceful seizure of power completely disappeared, and the chaos existence of two regimes came to an end. The provisional government completely tore apart its disguise and arrested Bolshevik members on a large scale. Lenin was forced to secretly transfer to Finland for refuge, and armed uprising became the only way out. 2. In November 6, 1917, October 24th, in the Russian calendar, Lenin secretly returned to Petrograd and personally led an arms uprising, marking the official start of the October Revolution. On November 7th, the rebel workers and revolutionary soldiers quickly occupied all strategic locations in the city. At 9:45 that evening, the iconic scene arrived. The cruiser Aurora fired the first shot of the attack on the Winter Palace. Red, the rebel army stormed into the Winter Palace and arrested all the temporary government ministers, leading to the complete collapse of the bourgeois temporary government. The October Revolution achieved a complete victory, and the world's first socialist country was officially born, opening a new chapter in human history. The first thing for the newly established Soviet regime was to fulfill its promises and end the war. The Soviet government immediately issued the peace decree and requested ceasefire negotiations from all the warring countries of World War I. But the Allied powers firmly refused to accept the ceasefire on the Eastern Front and spare Germany. In order to preserve the newly established regime and avoid falling into another war, the Soviet Union made a crucial decision to negotiate a ceasefire with Germany alone. In March 3rd, 1918, the two sides signed the extremely harsh Treaty of Brest. Soviet Russia was forced to cede 1 million square kilometers of territory and compensate Germany with 6 billion marks. This treaty may seem humiliating, but it was the wisest choice at the time. It allowed the devastated Soviet Union to completely withdraw from World War I, gaining valuable breathing space and stabilizing the newly established revolutionary regime. And this treaty completely changed the overall situation of World War I. The dilemma of fighting on both the East and West fronts that had troubled Germany for years has finally been resolved. The German army finally did not have to defend the Eastern line and was able to concentrate all the Eastern forces, equipment and firepower to the Western line, ready to launch the ultimate decisive counterattack against the British and French Allied forces. Just as Germany thought victory was imminent and was preparing to launch a full-scale attack on the Western Front, the entry of a superpower shattered all its illusions. In the next issue, we will focus on dismantling the biggest winner of World War I, the United States' participation in the war. Let's talk about Germany's crazy, unrestricted submarine warfare, how it forcefully dragged the neutral United States into the battlefield and completely rewrote the outcome of World War. Like and subscribe. Continue to follow the complete epic of World War I. See you in the next issue.